to begin this.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Ramneet, for that kind introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Pat. I am the co-founder and CEO at our company Is Empower. Along myself, I have Ramneet, who was lovely speaking just now. And we also have Archana, who will be our great speaker of tonight. So for those who are calling in for the first time, I'm very excited to introduce you to what we do here at Is Empower. And for those who have already joined us in the past, please type into the chat if this is not your first time. So then it really shows that you have engaged with us in the past and coming back for more. So I would really love to hear that. So for those who might not know what Is Empower is, I'd love to tell you a little bit of a personal story of why this is actually a mission that we all believe in. So I also was an international student myself. I grew up in Thailand. So hello, some Thai folks on the call. I came to Canada about 10 years ago for my bachelor degree, and it was very hard for me to find my first job in Canada. And I realized that it's really not just about writing a resume for us. We have a lot more unique needs, like cultural barriers or language barriers. I had no idea how to write my resume, I have no idea how to network with people, let alone thinking about permanent residency, which is something we're going to talk about today. So I said, hey, you know what? This needs to change. There has to be a system and a support system and something in place to help international students, because at the time there was no support system whatsoever for them. So we built one, and today we are Canada's first job search platform for international students. You can think of it as LinkedIn for international students. So the way that we solve that problem now is we connect students like yourself on the call all across Canada to the employers who want to hire you. So no more chasing after employers who, applying on, you apply online, you're probably not hearing back from the employers. We bring the employers who want to hire you to you instead. We also offer you with resources that match your profile. So anything related to job search, settlement, academic, you can create an account with us entirely for free, and you're going to get all those resources sent directly to you via email every week. We also have a supportive community like this on our Slack group, where we have close to 2,000 people on there right now, where you can ask questions, meet other mentors, and just be a safe space for you to learn from each other. So that is really all about us. If you have not created an account with us, I would highly recommend you to do so. We also host webinars like this every month, so stay tuned for more useful webinars coming your way. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to the highlight of the show tonight, which is our Archana, our speaker for today. So I also want to do this little quick survey. So raise your hand or type into the chat where you are in your PR application process. If you have already applied for it.
Pat, sorry to cut you off, but we have actually a poll for this.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna quickly launch the poll and people can answer that. And now I see both our polls are getting launched together, but please only answer the first one and we'll launch the feedback one again for you. So yeah, tell us where you are in your PR journey. Just you need to answer the first question.
Have you looked into how to get a PR? I have started my process, but need help. I have no clue. I somewhat have a clue, and then I am good. Is there a way to show the answer?
Yeah, I am. I'm just waiting for people to respond. We have about half of the people who have responded. So everyone, if you can quickly take a minute and respond, that will be great. And then we'll launch the results quickly.
We have to reply to both questions to submit.
No, just the first one. Sorry, the feedback just got coupled with it. So we're just going to ignore that one and just need to respond to the first one.
Yeah, I think.
But I like to see you guys are already loving it.
Yeah. We actually couldn't skip the second question, Ramneet, just so you know. So just pick random ones.
Oh, okay. So we have almost everyone responded. So, okay. So I'm going to end the poll at that. And we can all see the results. We have about 70% people who said they have somewhat of a clue, 14% have no clue, 10% have started their process, and about 6% are pretty good. So there. Perfect. You can go ahead.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll pass it on to Archana. Why don't we get your presentation up and then let you introduce yourself and take this over.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Pat. Thanks from Neet and all of you who joined from so many different parts of the world. That's really nice to see all of you here on the call. As Ramneet mentioned, I'm calling in from Vancouver Island. If you haven't visited, you should. It's beautiful. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. I have a lot to talk about today because PR is such a huge topic. So let's jump right in. Whenever you have questions, feel free to just drop it in the chat and we'll get to the questions after we're done with the presentation. Okay. Oh. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, perfect.
Okie doke. So welcome everyone to our webinar, and the focus of today's webinar is how do you go from being an international student in Canada to becoming a permanent resident? A little bit about me, as you guys already know, my name is Archana and I wear a few different hats, right? So I work in banking. I work with Vancity Community Investment Bank and I'm the Director of Strategy and Technology. It's a really fun job and I love it. And the other hat that I wear, which is very relevant to our webinar today, is I'm a licensed immigration consultant. So I studied immigration law at UBC and I practice immigration law, and my company's name is called Blue Lily Immigration Consulting. I also love to do a lot of work with nonprofits and community organizations, and that's actually how I met Pat and met all the great team at IsEmpower. Is because we wanted to do something together that's going to help students. So I've served on boards, I've run nonprofits, and right now I still continue to do that. So lots of different things going on, but it keeps me busy and it keeps it fun. But more importantly, what I want to tell you guys is I too was an international student. I came to Canada in the fall of 2014 to do a master's program. And then I stayed on and, got a job and finished all my PR and got my citizenship a couple of years ago. So I've been through like almost every leg of that journey, the immigration journey from start to finish. And just like how Pat was talking, it was my own personal experience that kind of motivated me to go and study immigration law so that I could help other people. Because when I did it, and I did most of it myself, it was really, really hard. Very confusing, a lot of paperwork, a lot of misinformation. And when I finally finished my own immigration process, I really, really felt like, there's a big gap over here, right? Like it should not be this stuff for international students. So that's why I studied immigration law and I practice these days. Okay, so what are we going to cover in today's webinar? Well, we all talk about PR, but what is it exactly? So we're going to Oh. Never mind. So we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what is PR and all the different pathways you can take to get there. Some of you may already know this, but Quebec has its own special immigration programs, and that's going to require like a webinar on its own. So we're not going to talk about Quebec immigration today. We'll also talk about some of the costs, the timelines, and I've also compiled lots of pro tips and myth busters for you guys. So hopefully that should help. Okay. So what is permanent resident? So essentially, if you're a permanent resident, you get a lot of advantages in Canada. Well, the biggest thing is you can live in Canada forever, right? So there's no end date. You don't have to go back after your visa expires, things like that. So it gives you a lot of stability. You put down your roots in this country. You don't have to worry about visas and things like that. The other thing is once you get your PR, you can do whatever you want in terms of working for any company or employer or any province or even studying anywhere, right? So if you decide to do a second study program later on, you don't need to apply for a separate visa. And the third important benefit is that once you apply for PR and you get your PR, after about 3 years' time, you can apply for Canadian citizenship, right? Many of you may already know, especially the travel buffs. That, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of like, interruptions. So maybe if you guys could just mute yourself, that would be helpful. Yeah, so if you apply for, Canadian citizenship and you get your Canadian passport, it's really good for traveling around the world. It's visa-free in many countries. So that's like a big draw for many people. And of course, the final benefit of being a PR is once you become a PR, you can sponsor other family members, right? So if you get married a few years down the line, that person can also become a PR. Any kids you have in the future, your parents, grandparents, you can sponsor all of them as well. Okay. Oh, first pro tip. Well, this is something that I learned myself. So when I came to Canada as an international student, I had taken an education loan from a bank in India. And many of you may already know this, but the loans are way more expensive when you take it from India. But when I became a PR in Canada, I found, oh, hold on a second, I can actually borrow money from a Canadian bank, which is much, much cheaper. So I actually changed my education loan from the Indian loan to a Canadian loan, and I ended up saving like thousands of dollars. So that's one of the like practical advantages of becoming a PR is you can get an education loan in Canada. And that really goes a long way. So start building your credit score right now in preparation. Okay, so let's talk about what does the typical pathway look like? How do you go from being an international student to becoming a permanent resident? This is the typical pathway. It's not one size fits all. So I just wanted to show you guys like what typically happens. There are some people who can skip some steps. There are some people who can go at it faster. There's all kinds of options out there, but I wanted to talk about like 80-20, right? What 80% of people will go through. So most of you who are already in Canada and studying here, you're familiar. You have a study permit. That's why you're studying, right? And usually after people finish their studies, they get a work permit. We'll talk more about that, right? And then they stay in Canada, they can get a job, get some really good work experience. And then sometimes they apply for the Provincial Nominee program and then apply for PR. I say sometimes because in other cases, some people may not need this step of Provincial Nominee. You could just jump straight from work permit to permanent residence as well, right? So this is kind of the typical pathway. I know it looks kind of long and scary, but we'll break it down today and hopefully give you guys enough, information and confidence to be able to tackle this. And remember that thousands of people have done this before you, right? So it's not impossible. It might be a little overwhelming, but it's not impossible. Okay. One of the things, and I always recommend, and we'll talk about this later as well, is I come across many students who say, well, I still have a year left. I don't need to think about this stuff right now. I can just do it later. But that's not true. I find that, the more you plan in advance, the better your chances are, and the cheaper and faster it'll be. So don't wait. Don't wait till, your visa is about to expire or your status is about to expire. Start thinking about your PR like now. Okay, so we'll just spend a couple of minutes on the study permit, not too much because you guys already know this. So essentially, when you're here on a study permit, you can stay till the expiry date. So check out your study permit, there'll be an expiry date, and that's the last day that you can stay in Canada legally, right? So there's a time clock that's ticking. Already you guys know this, that you can work part-time or you can work full-time doing breaks. And many of you might be like doing one program first and doing a second program. So in those cases, make sure you're applying for the second one before the first one expires. It does make things a lot easier. And I've also come across a lot of students who, they finish their program, but they want to stay for a month or two, right? Like hang around, travel, or they have stuff to take care of. So even if that's past your expiration date of your study permit, you can apply for a visitor visa and stay in Canada, right? And yes, last but not the least, once you've seen what the expiry date of your study permit is, be really, really, really careful about not overstaying past that date, right? It's not the end of the world, but it does make things a lot more difficult for, future PR and things like that if you've overstayed your study permit. So not worth the risk. If you want to stay in Canada longer, it's better you apply for a visitor visa and stay here. So one thing I wanted to put in your guys' head is like, and this is something I always recommend, go take a look after school as what your expiry date is and set the calendar back about 3 months from then, right? So if your study permit is going to expire say on March 30th, set your calendar for Jan 1st. So to keep it in mind that you don't miss a deadline and you're not like hustling at the last minute to get something. Okay, so jumping straight on. So you guys have got a study permit, you're about to finish your program of study. What do you do next, right? So the postgraduate work permit is a really, really good option for international students to stay in Canada and get some work experience. It's not the only type of work permit, but it's the easiest type of work permit. There are other types where you can go an employer to sponsor you and things like that. Those are a little bit more difficult. So what is the postgraduate work permit? So it's an open work permit, and an open work permit means that you can take that, work for any company, work in any province. There's like no restrictions, and you can work in any job, right? So even if you did your program of study in, say, computer science, the job you get with the PGWP does not have to be related to computer science. You could do anything that you want, right? So having this kind of open work permit gives you a lot of flexibility. It opens up more job opportunities for you. And it's the other important thing to remember with PGWP is you can only get it once a year. So if I got a PGWP once in 2015, and I can only get it once in a lifetime. I can't say, study another program and go back and say, hey guys, give me a second PGWP. It doesn't work that way. And this is something to be really, really careful about when you plan out your study. It's almost better if, I come across a lot of students who want to do 2 one-year programs. That's great. You can do that to get like more of a, a longer work permit later, but avoid doing a PGWP in between after the first program, because then after the second program, you're not going to get another one, right? You do not need a job offer to get a PGWP as long as you have graduated from an eligible institution and meet a few other criteria. They do not ask you whether you have a job offer or not, right? So one thing that if you guys haven't already done is make sure that the university that you are studying in and the program you are studying in is actually eligible for a PGWP. Not all of them are, right? So the easiest way to do that, just go to Google and type out designated learning institutions list. So you'll see something like this. I put a screenshot over here. So you pick the province that you're in, you type out the name of your university or college, and then you'll see like all the different unis listed here. And then the really last column says whether it's PGWP eligible or not, right? So that's what you need to see. If it's a yes, you're good. If it's a no, then yeah, you can't apply for this program. So hygiene, check, but worth doing, right? Why I say this is because I have come across students who have joined like really good colleges, right? Like really well-known, renowned colleges, but later find out, well, actually it's not PGWP eligible, right? So it's good to know right up front. In order to apply for PGWP, there's a few things you need to have done. So these are kind of the basic eligibility criteria. So first and foremost, the program of study you did should have been at least 8 months, right? So if you did a 6-month program, you cannot apply for a PGWP, right? The second criteria is what you're going to get after your study should be either a degree or a diploma or a certificate. It should be one of these 3 things. Even people, like a lot of people in Ontario are doing graduate certificates, like the Ontario postgraduate certificates, those qualify too for PGWP, that counts. And the third criteria is you should have been continuously enrolled as a student, right? So if you say did only 3 months of your program and then, I don't know, for some reason decided to take a break and then didn't go back and finish everything, that would be a problem. Unless there's like a legitimate reason or you've taken an approved leave of absence. If you have not been continuously enrolled, then you may not be eligible for the PGWP. Right. And the last thing is this is at the end of your program. Once you're done, your college will give you a transcript and an official completion letter saying this person has finished their program. You need that before being able to apply for PGWP. right? One thing here though is that very often, like students will get their transcript and official letter in a few weeks after they finish their final exam. You don't have to wait till your graduation. You don't have to wait till the ceremony where you get like your, degree and you get to wear the hats and things like that. No, you can usually get this within a few weeks after completing your final exam. So keep that in mind and maybe make a note for yourself to check back in with your college 2 or 3 weeks after your final exam to make sure that they give you these 2 important pieces of documents. One thing to keep in mind is after you apply for a PGWP, and it takes some time, right? It takes a few months for them to decide whether they're going to give you a PGWP or not. But in that interim time, typically you're allowed to work full time. Okay, so that can be really, really advantageous, especially if you're an international student and knowing how expensive Canada is. So you can finish your program, apply for a PGWP. After you apply for the PGWP, not after you finish your program, after you apply for the PGWP, you can start working full time. So you can gain a little bit of extra few months of experience and some income. And then when your PGWP decision comes in a few months, and then you decide what to do. So if it's approved, great, you just keep doing what you're doing and you keep working. If it's not approved, then of course, that's a totally different matter. So this is a really good thing for people to remember, like you can start working full time after you've applied for the PGWP. So I recommend that you apply as soon as possible so you can go out and get a job. When you apply for the PGWP, there's a time limit. Like you can't apply, say, 2 years or 3 years after you finish your program. Typically, it has to be done within 6 months of getting the official letter from your college, right? So there is a deadline, and you shouldn't waste any of it really. So I say don't even wait the entire 6 months. Like as soon as you get your completion letter, keep everything ready and just apply. You can apply online. It's fairly easy, the online portal. The fees is about $255 to get your PGWP. And right now it takes about 5 months time. So IRCC, that's Immigration Canada, that's the governmental organization that issues all the visas and things like that. They have had a lot of changes in their processing time. There was a time when PGWPs were coming like in less than a month, but right now it's really slow because of COVID and things like that. So it takes about 5 months, right? So there's a bit of a wait, but going back to the tip I shared in the previous slide, you can, if you apply, you can work full time during these like 4 or 5 months of waiting, right? Which otherwise, if you don't apply and you can't work, it can get a little bit expensive. Probably some of you started your program right in the middle of the pandemic in 2020 and had to switch to online options and things like that and didn't have in-person classes. Now, pre-pandemic, in-person classes were not eligible for the PGWP, but that has changed, right? So Immigration Canada knows that, hey, can't help it. A lot of people had to do online. So you may still be eligible, even if you did like a lot of in-person classes because of the pandemic. So another tip for you guys is to try and apply before your study permit expires, right? So typically most people who get a study permit, there'll be some buffer. Like it's not like, your program ends on November 1st and your study permit expires on November 2nd. Very rarely will that be the case. You will have some time in between. So use that buffer really wisely, right? So apply it before your study permit expires. If you don't, you're just going to have to do like additional applications, right? Going to cost you more time and going to cost you more money and make it expensive. So that's why these deadlines and when you apply and things like that become really, really key. Okay, another common question I get is, how long do I get my postgraduate work permit for? So really simple math. If you did 12 months of study, you get 12 months of PGWP typically, right? So X equals X. The official exception to this rule is if you've done a program that's more than 2 years, right? So it could be 24 months, could be 27 months, things like that. So typically anything above 24 months, your PGWP will be for 36 months. So you get a 3-year work permit in Canada, which is really awesome, right? I say official because in practice, I've seen sometimes visa officers do give a longer PGWP. Like I've come across cases where, say the program of study was only for 16 months, but the person got a 2-year PGWP, which is awesome, right? Like that's a bonus, but don't count on it, right? It depends on the visa officer and their judgment and discretion. So it's not like an official rule. If you get it, you're lucky, but don't count on it, right? One more thing I want to talk about here is, people who are doing multiple programs of study. So doing first one and then another. So really common case these days. And a lot of people are doing it so that they can get that 24 months of study. So in those cases, yes, you can add the 2 programs together, right? So you can say 12 months from program 1 plus 12 months from program 2 equals 24 months. And therefore you might be eligible for a 36-month program, right? So that's a really good option for people who want to stay in Canada longer and get a 3-year work permit, is to increase how much time you spend in your studies. It's becoming a really popular option these days. So something for you guys to keep in mind. Okay, before we move on from PGWP, just wanted to quickly touch on some myth busters. I've heard this a lot, so I thought, okay, here's my chance to smash some myths, okay? The first thing I hear is that, oh, I got a study permit, so I should be getting a PGWP. Like, it's automatic, it's a no-brainer. No, unfortunately, I wish it were that easy, but it isn't. It's still a separate application, and it's still a visa officer making a decision. So don't take it lightly. Just because you get your study permit doesn't mean you automatically get a PGWP. You really have to be careful with your application and make sure you're doing a very good job, right? The other thing I hear a lot is people saying, yeah, I'm just going to go back to my country, chill for a bit, take it easy, take a vacation, and then I'll decide if I want a PGWP. But remember that there's that 6-month deadline. You have to apply within 180 days of getting your completion letter. So don't miss that window. But you can apply from outside. So even if you finish a program of study, you want to go back to your home country and apply from there for a PGWP, you can totally do that too, right? And the last thing I want to touch upon is medical tests, right? So I get this question a lot. If you work in some professions, especially healthcare related professions, you might need to do a medical test even before you apply for a PGWP, right? I've known of some students who have missed doing this, like they plan to work in healthcare, they don't apply for it, and then it just takes much longer, right, for the PGWP to come. So check, think about what profession you're going to go into, think about if it's going to be Google whether it's part of the professions that need a medical test for PGWP, and if it is, then you should get your medical test before you apply. Okay, so that's a PGWP section. I'm just going to quickly check the time. Oh, we better keep it moving. It's 4:30. Okay, doc. So moving on. So I want to talk a little bit about provincial nominee programs, or PNPs, right? So like I said, this is an additional step to becoming a PR. Not everyone needs it. Let's be super clear about that. There are many students who have just a really good profile and get a high number of points for PR, and they can just skip directly, right, to PR. They don't need to do the PNP. So it's not necessary for everyone, but it's really advantageous if, you can't make the PR cut on your own and you're going to need a little additional help and you need some additional points. That's when you need to start looking at what are the different PNP options, right? So what is a provincial nominee program? Okay, so if you look at immigration, like almost all the immigration that is done, it's all federal programs, right? It's at the national Canadian level. It's all centralized, but each province has its own requirements, right? Each province says we need these kind of people or these kind of immigrants to come in. So the federal government has given each province a quota saying, okay, Alberta, you want a certain type of, profile of people. You get to pick a few people on your own, right? And those few people that Alberta picks will be called Alberta's provincial nominees, right? So essentially, Alberta will say, I want this person. I nominate the 3 of them. And because I nominate the 3 of them, they get 600 additional points, which later goes a long way in getting PR. So that's why I say it's an additional step. If you get your PNP, you're getting a whole bunch of extra points, and you take the whole bunch of extra points and then you go and apply for PR, right? So can't do PNP. I mean, there's no point doing a PNP if you don't intend to do a PR. PNPs are a really, really complex topic. So we're going to just stay on the surface today because that's like a 3-hour webinar on its own, getting to all the different PNPs. But there are about 80 different PNP programs. Most provinces, except a couple of provinces in Canada, have their own PNP programs. So it's really important to kind of find what your fit is, right? Like which province you're a fit for. So typically, you're a good fit for a particular province's PNP if either you have some skills that that province really, really needs. Like there's a shortage of people in that skill. Like for example, in BC, a really popular PNP program is the BC PNP Tech, right? It's meant for primarily tech workers, but there are some other professions also included because BC really needs people in tech, right? So they've said, we're going to nominate people in tech. Or, you've studied in that province before, you might get like, a better chance at PNP, or you have a job offer from a company in the province. Or in the case of some provinces, even if you have family, like you have close relatives there, then that might make you more successful in getting a PNP, right? But what I've outlined is kind of common factors, right? Each program is very, very specific, very, very tailored, has its own eligibility requirements. So you do need to spend a little bit of time, doing some research or working with a professional who can do that research for you. So a little while ago, we were talking about BC PNP Tech. So just a little tip here that even though it's called BC PNP Tech, it's actually not just tech. You have graphic designers included, you have writers, engineers, translators, people who work in film, broadcast. So there's a whole lot of professions out there in BC PNP Tech. So if you're thinking about BC and if you're thinking about PNP, go check out the tech occupations list and you might find that there's something there that meets you. Okay, so how do you apply for a PNP? There's essentially two ways. So, and I'll tell you what those ways are. Some people, what they do is they say, first, I'm going to apply to a particular province's PNP, like say Ontario, right? Then if I get it, I'm going to take that PNP and then apply for a PR. You can do that. Or some people flip that process, right? So first they apply for PR, like they get their basic application in through Express Entry. We'll talk about what Express Entry is. And once they get that basic application, and then they go and apply to Ontario and say, hey, Ontario, give me a PNP. And then the Ontario will add the points to this basic application. So it can work either way, depending on what is right for your situation. Again, because there are 80 different PNP programs, they really vary in how they are operated. So some of them are free. The Ontario ones can get kind of expensive, like somewhere even $1,500 to $2,000. And again, some are online and some are on paper. So we won't spend too much time on the PNP because it's a big topic, but yeah, just wanted to give you guys an overview. Coming back to the point I made a few minutes earlier about planning in advance, that's really, really important because this is a good time to plan when you guys are still students, because if you know that, yeah, I am going to need to do a PNP, I do need those 600 extra points to become a PR, then you need to start planning now. You might have to move to that province or try and find a job in that province. So don't wait even till you get your PGWP. Like even when you're a student, start planning it, and that's just going to help you in the future. Okay, we'll end with some quick mythbusters on PNP and then jump quickly to PR. The biggest myth I heard here is, oh, you need a job offer to get a PNP. Not true. For many PNPs, you need a job offer, but there are many PNPs where you can get in even without a job offer. It is open to people, whether they're inside Canada or outside Canada. It doesn't matter so much. And yeah, it's not everyone who applies for it. There's a draw, there's a process, they pick a few people and things like that. So it's not, again, like an automatic approval. Okay, now we'll come to our key topic, which is PR programs. So we talked a little bit initially about what are the advantages of being a PR, right? So to become a permanent resident, you have to apply through a particular program. There's, again, like lots of PR programs. There's almost 50 or 60 of them, but the really popular ones and the ones especially that are a good fit for international students are these three, right? So the Federal Skilled Worker, the Canadian Experience Class, and the Federal Skilled Trade. The Federal Skilled Trade is a little bit more specialized. It's for tradespeople like, electricians, plumbers, and things like that. So we won't spend a lot of time talking about that today, but we will talk about the first two, especially because Immigration Canada is again going to be prioritizing these two from June of this year. So it's going to open up and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you guys. So you guys, I'm pretty sure, would have heard of Express Entry. It's almost impossible to not hear of Express Entry these days. So what is it, right? And it's really important that we understand this. So Express Entry is not a PR program on its own. It's just an online channel, right? So it has its own processes. It has a way of application. So even though you apply for Express Entry, you're going to be applying for one of these 3 programs under Express Entry. So just keep that in mind, that there's a program and then there's a channel, right? So each one is really different from each other, and it varies a lot in terms of who it's a fit for. And we'll talk about the first 2, but roughly, it's going to cost you fees about $1,365, and that number has been changing a little bit. So, go online and look for the updated fees when you're ready to apply. And it takes anywhere between 1 and 2 years. Again, it really depends on the pandemic and Immigration Canada's backlog and things like that. So it varies a lot. Okay. So let's talk about federal skilled worker, right? This is probably the most popular option for international students. I've done a lot of work in helping people apply for this FSW program. And when I became a PR, I also applied through this program. So this program, as it says in the title, is meant for skilled workers. But what does that mean? What does skilled workers mean, right? It typically means that you have some training in order to be able to do that job, right? It's not, working at a retail store or things like that, because you don't need a training or an education for it, right? So either it's some kind of a managerial job, like, you work in a bank, or you work in HR, or you're in sales and things like that. Or it's a professional job, like, typically a lot of people with technical skills fit in here. So they're engineers or architects and software developers. Or sometimes you even have slightly technical jobs like office administrator, right? That's considered a technical job by Immigration Canada, and it's considered as a skilled job because you need some training and background to be able to do this. So there are lots of different professions included in federal skilled worker. There's probably more than 50 or 60 of them. So one of the key things is to be able to identify what your future job is going to be, like what kind of job you're likely to get, and will that job be part of the eligible for the federal skilled worker program. So in order to apply for this, there are some basic eligibility factors. So first and foremost, you need 1 year of continuous work experience, okay? Now, let's pause on this for a second, because if you remember, I said the PGWP is a really important stepping stone, and this is why, right? Many people, many international students who come to Canada don't have work experience, right? Because they're studying. But you can't apply for this program unless you have work experience. So that's why they get a PGWP, get minimum 1 year of Canadian work experience, and then they apply for this, right? Some of the other eligibility factors is you need a minimum of IELTS 6, which shouldn't be difficult because I think most people who come to Canada have that level. You need to have at least finished high school. Again, irrelevant to you guys because most of you will have graduate or postgraduate degrees. You do need settlement funds. This is a huge, huge factor for FSWP. For a single person, if you're not married, you need to show that you have $13,310 in the bank, right? Your parents could give you that money, whatever it is, but you need to show that you have this money, right? Also, you need to make sure there's no prior criminal police cases, no DUIs. DUIs are a big no-no in Canada. And of course, there are some points calculation as well, which I don't want to get into too much today, but yeah, there are some basic criteria to be met. But the key thing is, remember, 1 year of experience and $13,000 in settlement funds, right? So in contrast, the Canadian Experience Class program is a little bit different. It's still meant for skilled work. So still the same kinds of managerial, professional, and technical jobs. But the key difference is it's for professionals with 1 year of Canadian experience, right? Again, this is why the PGWP becomes important. So if you get your PGWP and work for a year, now you have an option, right? After you have 1 year of Canadian experience, you can choose, do I want to apply for the federal skilled worker program, or do I want to apply for the Canadian Experience Class program? And each of them have their own pros and cons, right? So one of the advantages of the Canadian Experience Class program, you will see on this checklist, there's no settlement funds. So you do not need to show $13,300, right? So huge advantage of applying for Canadian Experience Class. Again, you need to have 1 year experience, but it needs to be Canadian work experience with a Canadian company. Any work that you do while you're still studying, like internships or co-ops, unfortunately do not count towards that 1 year. It has to be post-studies. And you need to make sure that when you apply for it, the work experience, the Canadian work experience that you're claiming is not more than 3 years old, right? Another key thing, it has to be paid work experience. You have to show proof that you got paid for the job. So it can't be a volunteer position or something like that. Okay. Just quickly take a look at the time. I do want to save some time for questions. Pat, Ramneet, should we maybe end sooner and do Q&A, because I have like way more slides.
Yeah, we actually have quite a bit of questions.
Right.
So how many more slides?
I have like another 5 or 10 slides. I'll be quick. I'll wrap up in
Okay.
5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, perfect. And then I'll launch the questions. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we'll skip through some of this. Okay, let's talk about some tips. This is where I really want to spend some time and attention, right? Because I see a lot of students kind of making mistakes, and I want you guys to avoid that. So I've compiled some tips for you guys, right? The first thing which we talk about, and if there's one thing you take away from this webinar, let it be this: plan in advance, right? I cannot tell you how many students have come across who wait till it's too late, haven't done planning, suddenly find that they can't apply for PNP, can't apply for PR, spend all this money. It's crazy. So don't do that. Plan, right? Figure out what you're going to do. Figure out if you need a PNP, if you don't need a PNP, all that stuff. The second tip I have for you is, try and do your research on the official Immigration Canada site. It's called IRCC, so just Google it. And the URL will be canada.ca/immigration, refugee, and citizenship. If you have any questions, you can even tweet at IRCC, and they're pretty good at responding. Why I say this, go to the official pages, is because that's where you'll find the most up-to-date information, because it changes all the time. And that's where you'll find the real information. Unfortunately, I know there are a lot of good immigration forums. Some are good, some are bad, and some of them just give terrible advice. I've seen so much wrong advice and bad advice on those forums that it's scary. I've seen people who are looking at some thread from 2015 and thinking it applies to them, but it's changed since 2015, right? The worst that I've seen is Quora. I don't know why, maybe it's full of some trolls or something. It's just really, really bad forum for immigration. So be careful and avoid that, right? And connected to that is my third tip, which is that it's not one size fits all. So if something works for your friend, if your friend got a PNP, it's not necessary that you might get it, right? But if a friend got a PGWP, it might not necessarily be for you. There are so many small factors that go into each person's, success in PR that it's almost impossible to compare, apples and oranges. So which is why even the work that I do, it's highly personalized. I can't just be okay, you're an international student, do this. No, it's really, really personalized. So keep that in mind. And that's another reason you have to be careful about, forums like Quora, right? Because the person who's posting there has posted their opinion and their experience, but it may not always work for you. So you got to be a little careful with that. The fourth tip I have is a lot of people do it themselves, right? They say, no, I don't want to hire a lawyer or an immigration consultant. I want to do it myself, which is fine. And you have a lot of information and resources available online to do that. But then the mistake they make is if they've applied for a study permit before and now they're applying for a PGWP, those two applications have completely different details, right? The dates are wrong or the addresses are wrong. And there's just this discrepancy, which later comes and becomes a problem, right? It's not that they're doing it intentionally, it's just sometimes an honest human mistake, but that can get really costly. So if you are planning to do it yourself, which is fine, go back, open all the other Immigration Canada applications you've done before for your study permit and things like that, and try and copy information from it, right? The fifth tip I have for you is if you do decide to hire a consultant, make sure they're legit. It's really unfortunate, but there's a lot of unethical people in my profession, people who will, take money and promise you things, but nothing happens. So, and there are a lot of people who practice even though they're not licensed to practice. So tomorrow, if something goes wrong, you can't get a hold of them or get your money back. So if you look online, there's a public directory that the government has published, which tells you these people are, professionally licensed to provide you immigration advice. So make sure that your consultant is on that list, right? And the last step is if you have a PGWP expiring this year, you're in for luck because Immigration Canada just announced they're going to be extending your work permit by another 18 months. So, which is really awesome news. The announcement just came out a few weeks ago. If you are part of the Is Empower community, sorry, we Pat and I were talking and we decided to make sure you guys have a lot of support, because obviously this is complicated legal things that we want you to be able to navigate smoothly. So one thing we are offering is if you have been part of this webinar, you can talk to us, talk to me, and get a 20-minute consultation for free, so we can kind of help you plan that PR pathway. What I've been talking about is to be able to map out your steps. So send me an email. My email is archana@bluelily.ca. I'm probably going to be inundated with 84 emails, so it might take me a day or two to get back to you, but we will schedule a time and we will talk about your PR goals. We are also offering discounts to any Is Empower students who want to work with us. And of course, like Pat said, we have a Slack channel. So there's a lot of people on there. And if you have any questions, reach out through Slack as well. And that's it.
Can we give a little bit of applause for Archana, please? Thank you. That was a wonderful and very incredibly helpful session. So I'm going to share my screen now because we have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So a lot. So Archana. Okay, so
we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to pick and choose a few.
Yeah.
Do I need a TRV?
Yeah, you can choose. Okay, go ahead. Do I need TRV with
the PGWP? So for those of you who don't know, a TRV is a visitor visa. No, you don't need one. If you apply for a PGWP, that's more than enough for you. You don't need a separate TRV. However, if you decide to stay in Canada after your study permit expires, then you do need one.
Okay. Does internship during one program counts toward the experience for PR?
Internship during one program. So internships, if it's done during a study program, then that work experience does not count. So it doesn't matter which program, just any work experience gained while you were a student in Canada doesn't count.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hi, a family friend here in Canada often gives me weekly allowance via e-transfer, but he's not a sponsor in my study permit application. Will it affect my PR?
That's a tricky one. I would say, off the top of my head, no, it shouldn't, unless it's a very considerable sum of money, and then, you might have some explaining to do.
Okay, so we'll try to skip some of the very personalized and personal ones and then go to the ones that perhaps apply to other people. Okay, what happened after 1 year post-graduation? Work permit is over, but I have permanent full-time, no end date.
I didn't understand the question, Pat. We'll skip. Maybe we'll go to the next one. It doesn't look complete.
Okay. If we apply for post-graduation work permit 180 days after completion of our programs, how do we do the transcript since my study hasn't complete?
Yeah. So the 180 days is after you get your letter, right? So you will only get your completion letter after you finish your studies, and it's 180 days after that. It's not 180 days before that. So you would have definitely completed your studies, because only then will you get the letter and only then can you apply for PGWP.
Mm-hmm. Okay, after applying for post-graduation work permit, but still waiting for a response, can we apply to bring our spouse over to Canada?
Yeah, yes, you can. There are some special spousal open work permits, and you can apply for that. However, what I would recommend is if you're fairly further down in your PGWP decision and you're just having to wait another month or two for the decision, wait for the decision to come before you apply for your spouse. It'll be way more effective than doing it now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. If we work in the field of study after applying for post-graduation work permit and before getting post-graduation work permit, does this count toward Canadian experience for PR?
Yes.
In which case could I apply for an open work permit while studying?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Very special cases. There are some options if you're being sponsored by an employer in Canada. But again, it's like tricky because you're a student at the same time. And there are some cases for Mexican nationals where they might get a NAFTA open work permit, but I won't go into the details now.
Mm-hmm. What are the requirements needed for study permit extension? Perhaps skip this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Do internship counts toward Canadian experience? No, it doesn't count if it's on your study.
Yeah. Doesn't count, but there's a second part to that question, which is, does it have to be a full-time job? So forget internship, but if you do get a job which is part-time, that still counts towards your PR work experience.
Okay. When is the best time to apply if my study permit expires July 23 and our graduation is April 23?
Yeah, so don't wait for your graduation, because graduation sometimes takes place almost 8 months after you finish your study program. So as soon as you finish your study program, within a few weeks, you should get your transcript and official letter. Apply right away. You do not have to wait till your graduation in 2023.
Okay, if I apply for study permit extension, will I apply immediately also for permit extension for my dependents?
You have to apply together.
Okay. Can I apply for PR while studying master degree, and then once master is done, the point will I get added to my profile?
Yes, you can. In fact, that's what I did. So I came to Canada in 2014 as a student. I applied during my master's in 2015, and I became a PR in 2016.
Okay, I have been in Canada for 4 years studying part-time working, and my common law is Canadian. Can I apply for PR directly?
I can't, tell you yes or no based on just that. We'll have to look at your, profile and assess that. So email me, we'll set up a time and we can talk about it more.
Okay, how true is that even NOC 3, 4, and 5, NOC C and D, can also count for CRX point for work experience despite not counting for the express entry minimum requirement?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one. In my experience, it doesn't count. It just wouldn't work because CRS, the points calculation, like especially if it's federal skilled worker, you need to demonstrate that it's skilled work. So if the skilled work is not in, is C and D, it's really hard to even show that it's skilled work.
Okay. For PR, is it okay to use settlement fund that is in our country of origin, even we are here already in Canada?
Yes, you can use funds in your own country. It doesn't have to be in Canada.
You mentioned there are 3 different PR programs, but the first 2 are similar. Could you apply for both for better odds?
I would not recommend it. It's just going to make it really complicated and cost you twice the amount of money. And it just, I would not recommend doing that. Pick one and apply for one.
Can a student under permit apply for PR or PNP?
A student, you can apply for either. The PNP piece, there are so many different PNP programs and each one is different. So you'll have to dig a little bit deeper into the PNP program you're interested in. But overarching, yes.
This one might be tricky. Is teaching?
I don't know that one actually. So I'm going to have to look it up later.
Is it okay to create an express entry profile even as a student if my wife has a job so she can create her express entry profile separately?
Yeah, you can create an express entry profile as a student. If you're married, then the express entry profile and the points calculation is done for the couple together. So there's actually, if you're married or you're in common law relationship, there's no real concept of applying separately. That is, if both of you want to be in Canada, you have to apply together. So since your wife is already working, has a job, you can probably start right away.
Does full-time professional working experience built while waiting for post-graduation count towards 1 year of Canadian work experience?
Yes.
In how many days do we get a letter up after applying for post-graduation work permit? The letter that gives us permission to work full-time.
So there's no letter. Nobody's going to give you an official document saying you can work. That's just the law. So you apply and then you can start working. You don't need to wait for a letter.
I just applied for postgrad work permit and had the first job interview. If I got the job, what happened if the post graduation work permit got rejected?
Well, I really hope you get the job. If you if your PGWP gets rejected, then obviously you can't legally work in Canada. At that point, you'll have to start looking at other options, like any other work permits that you might qualify for and things like that. But yeah, you can't work if your PGWP gets rejected.
Yeah. When is the tier system going to come in effect? Do we start not be job that will be?
Yeah, I don't understand that question, Pat. Can we skip?
Yeah. Okay. What are your consultation fee for PGWP to PR?
So it varies from case to case. For PGWP, we charge $300. That's over and above that IRCC processing fee you have to pay directly of $255. And for PR, it varies, right? So we have a few different packages. Some people kind of, have the time and capacity to do half the things on their own, but they still need like advice and help with the consultant. Like they want to make sure that they're doing it right and not making any mistakes. So those are $1,000 upwards. If we, do the full meal deal, that is the full service package, where essentially the students like, yeah, I don't want to do all of this. This is complicated. You do it for me. Then it's $2,000 upwards. We are giving 10% discounts to all Empower students, like across the board, no questions asked. And we also offer payment plans because, when I was a student, I would not have been able to afford $2,000. So I get it. So we split it up, right? We make it easy monthly installments and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's actually more affordable than what I have paid for in the past. Okay, so after you get post-graduation work permit, can we get an extension if PR hasn't arrived?
It depends on what the programs are in place at that point of time. So it's kind of hard for me to answer it now. Like Canada might have special programs. Like just now they launched the one for people whose PGWPs expire in 2022, right? Extension of 18 months. So it depends on what policy is in place at that point of time when your PGWP is about to expire. So you should probably look into that about 6 months before it expires.
All right, sounds good. Sorry, everybody, we are at time and all of the questions are still here. So I'm going to try my best to send this over to Ashna. But if anything, you can find her on our Slack group and you can also ask your questions separately. I would highly encourage you to book a free 20 minutes consultation with her. It's very difficult to find such free consultation anywhere. So highly recommend you to do so. I did put in her email into the chat, but feel free to find her on our Slack group as well. So before we depart today, I also want to quickly tell you about what we offer at Empower. So if you haven't signed up for our free account, please feel free to do so. We have a lot of webinars coming up and also resources. I also want to let you know that we have a job search program tailored to international students as well, where we help them get a job and we help you get a job until you actually get hired. So if you are interested, Ramneet is going to place the link into the chat so you can learn more about it. And we are excited to have you into the program. And that is all a little promotion for me. Now,
hey, can I ask a question?
We might have to depart Alfredo, so my apologies, but you can keep your questions to her directly.
Oh, but it's fast. It's not like I just want to know which program she applied when she moved. Like she told like she started like consultation certification of immigration, or what did she study for get the post-graduation work permit after?
Oh, what did I study in Canada?
Yeah.
Oh, I did a master's in digital media.
Digital media. Okay. How about the program you told like UBC certificate in immigration? How long does it take? Do I get my PR?
3 years.
Do I get my 3 years?
It takes almost 2 years to do that.
Oh, okay. It's like a long. And after that, I can apply for a post-graduation work permit like for 2 or 3 years, right? UBC
we should chat offline, Alfredo.
Yeah,
it's a little bit more complicated than that. So chat.
Just want to know if because there's a lot of questions. I want to know, do you need to study law before or take some classes to get like a certification in immigration at
Yeah,
UBC.
yeah, you have to study a lot and pass a very difficult exam. But let's talk